Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. This is our Takeout, Emil Amok's Takeout, the day before Thanksgiving, show 187 of the program we affectionately call WDAAAAAT. What does an Asian American think? I mean, because they don't usually ask. We'll tell you. What do we think about the Arbery verdicts? Reaction. We'll have Professor Dan Gonzalez, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University, and a JD. He'll come in and talk about it a little bit. We'll talk about what AAPI really should be thinking about when they see the Arbery verdicts. And I'll talk about my Thanksgiving story time coming up, because this is the day before Thanksgiving. You know, this is our show, what I call the micro talk show of the AAPI and the AAXs. And you don't have to be an AAPI. You can just be an ALL, which is all the rest of you. These are my musings that are usually on my ALDEF column, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. Go to aldef.org/blog. And, you'll see some of the things that start here and bubble up, end up there. But we usually come on 2 p.m. Pacific live because we like the idea of going live. We like the idea of living dangerously. And we will talk about the big stories, but I want to talk about some things coming up over the weekend. It's Thanksgiving. And I know for many of us, it will be a much better Thanksgiving if you were watching that trial, the Arbery trial. We're going to talk about that in a second. But a little later on today, I'm going to do Emil Amok's story time, and that recording is going to play tomorrow, because we all know that Thanksgiving is a day of reflection. You talk to your family, you tell stories, and we'll be telling stories on Emil Amok's story time, and it'll run throughout tomorrow. So whenever you can see it, you can catch it on the Facebook page, EmilGuillermo.media on Facebook, aka Meta. Oh, it's Facebook, but Meta they call it now. Also on the YouTube channel, and you can catch it on Emil Amok on Twitter. Emil Amok Storytime, Holiday Edition. I talk about my grandma. I talk about my Lola. And we'll have other Filipino stories, other Asian American stories coming up tomorrow. That's on Thanksgiving. And then I'll be back on Friday probably just to say hi. Don't spend too much money. Come on, be more spiritual, less materialistic. But today, it's going to be a happier day. Although, look, no celebration, more reflective. Let's talk about those Arbery verdicts. And we'll have Professor Dan come up in a second. But really, honestly, how would you know what would happen? I mean, you knew that the pressure of holiday deliberation would get to the jury. And you knew from what they wanted to see and wanted to hear, again, the 911 call, that video that shows Ahmaud Arbery running. We knew that they were taking their time, but we also knew that the prosecution really laid out a closing argument the other day. And if you saw show 185 and show 186, we talked about it, and we played clips. Linda Donikoski, who is not even from that county, from Glenn County, she had to come in, just like the judge had to come in to Glenn County. This is a mostly white rural county. And it was, the jury was, 11 whites, 1 black, in a county that's about 30% black. So we had to deal with this idea that, would the history of the all-white jury come back and haunt us in the Deep South? Would we see racial bias here? is there a reason why there were no arrests made in 74 days in this case? Is there a reluctance that is a holdover from the racist past of the Deep South? I mean, these are all questions, right? This is why. And then there were all these little asides that happened in the courtroom. You know, when the defense attorneys didn't want another black minister showing up. They were talking about things going on outside. The Black Panthers were there. This was a racial event of protest to make sure that the justice system got it right. And like I said, is there anyone who was so sure that that the jury would get it right? I mean, I couldn't. Coin flip at best, 60-40. I'm sure some of the defense attorneys thought, and we'll hear from some of the defense attorneys, I'm sure they thought we did our best job, but thank goodness. And I'll play a clip from them. They said, you know, jury has spoken. And so here we have it, the jury coming back, Travis McMichael, his father, Greg McMichael, and their neighbor, William Roddy Bryan, convicted of felony murder in the shooting of Arbery, 25-year-old black man. That means they found that they caused Arbery's death. Now, there's another charge, this idea of malice murder, the intent to kill. And that's why when I tweeted out earlier, it wasn't a majority not guilty verdict. There were some not guilties. The jury found that William Roddy Bryan and Greg McMichael they were not guilty of malice murder, the intent to kill. In 4 charges out of 27 total charges for those three defendants. But Travis McMichael, the man who had the shotgun, was convicted of malice murder, and all 9 charges against him guilty. So that's the headline. All 3 guilty of felony murder. Felony murder. And all men still facing federal hate crime charges. I mean, they could receive life for already what they've done, but they can more life sentences without parole coming up, and that case is in February. And of course, after the trial, the lawyers of the defendants who were sent back into custody, shackled, their lawyers say they're going to appeal. I'm telling you, when I heard the guilties for McMichael, I was listening to the verdicts. I didn't scream out loud, but I was shouting out to the other side of the room. My wife, they're guilty, or he's Travis McMichael, the guy with the shotgun. And then I was listening to the other verdicts because there was 9 each, and Greg McMichael for malice, not guilty. And I thought, oh, what's going to happen here? And then on all the other charges, especially for felony murder, guilty. Same with, and I think the malice, not guilty for Greg McMichael's because Greg McMichael was in the truck, right? He was in the car when Travis McMichael was struggling with the shotgun and then shot Ahmaud Arbery. And then William Roddy Bryan, he was not guilty for malice murder. And I thought, well, what's going to happen to him? And then when they read off the charges, all the other charges, guilty, aggravated assault, guilty, felony murder. So once again, malice murder, intent to kill. Travis McMichael William Roddy Bryan just tried to drive Ahmaud Arbery into a ditch. So they didn't get him for malice murder, but they got him for felony murder because the law says if you're a party to it, you're in it. But they did get Travis McMichael, the man who held the shotgun, They got him for malice murder. So that explains the verdicts. And now Asian Americans, what should you feel? This is Georgia. The fact that these three men are going to face federal hate crime charges is significant because does it sound a little bit like Vincent Chin? Right? When Vincent Chin, after the criminal case, they had federal hate crime, federal civil rights charges brought up. And that's where the first go round in the Vincent Chin case, the community won. Later on, that was reversed. But this is the step. The crime, then federal hate crime charges. And this is something that you wouldn't have had in Georgia 5-10 years ago because they just recently put in the hate crime law. And coincidentally, this week, Robert Aaron Jones, the man, or Robert Aaron Long, excuse me, the man who is accused in the murders at the Atlanta spas in Fulton County. He's already been convicted of 3 in his spa killings in Cherokee County in Georgia. But he faces trial for the killings in Fulton County. The hate crime law will apply to Robert Aaron Long. And if you had doubts about how justice is administered in Georgia, this should give Asian Americans who are looking ahead. Like I said, Robert Aaron Long made an appearance in court this week, coincidentally, to set court dates in the future, sometime in the spring, pretrial motions. And it's just a reminder that if you had doubts about the legal system, the justice system in Georgia, we can feel a little better after we saw today that justice was served. So just a little aside, I mean, not to take anything away from the cases involved right now, but as an Asian American who is looking at the Atlanta trial, or the Atlanta case, Atlanta massacre, the spa killings, and the upcoming trials, a little, with some not real trepidation, but just wondering what will happen. I think we can sense that you should feel better today after we saw that justice was served in the matter of the McMichaels and William Rodney Bryan, who were held accountable for the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. So I want to play one thing, because you saw a lot of people out there talking. You got to love Reverend Al. Reverend Al made it a prayer. Here's Reverend Al out there. I got to play Reverend Al, but I got to plug in Reverend Al. I have to make sure I have the right thing for Reverend Al. Okay, here's Reverend Al. Okay.
Dear God, we come thanking you for your mercy, thanking you for giving us a prosecutor's team that when it looked to us like they stacked the jury, that you still found a way to open up the minds of people to listen to the evidence and weigh it based on facts, not based on skin color.
Now, this is significant. The fact that he mentions the prosecution team, because they were hauled in from Cobb County, another suburban county of Atlanta, because there were at least 2 prosecutors who had to recuse themselves from the case. I mean, you got pretty much a predominantly white area here And you got a former cop. Greg McMichael was a former cop. And then you have Travis McMichael, who was Coast Guard, military, right? That was part of his defense. He was taught to stand down. And you really weren't sure what would happen with a predominantly white jury. That's why Sharpton is praying that they listen to the evidence. The jury listened to the evidence based on facts, not based on skin color.
Come on. That you gave strength to this mother and you gave strength to this father to not give up on you, even when many of us doubted, even when many of us said it's not going to happen. You came in the state of Georgia, a state known for segregation, a state known for Jim Crow, and you turned it around. You took a young, unarmed boy that they thought was worthless, and you put his name in history today. Years from now, decades from now, they'll be talking about a boy named Ahmed Arbery that taught this country what justice looks like. As we go forth, let us.
Is there any doubt that we're going to remember this case for a long time? You know, when I first heard this case, I thought, wow, a guy running, jogging while black, these white guys, essentially armed vigilantes, chase after him for 5 miles and then gun him down. You know, we'll remember this as maybe, if not a turning point, a reminder that we are further from the past than we think. We're not all the way where we need to be necessarily, but we are in a different place from that racist Jim Crow past. Here's more Sharpton.
Go forth in the victory you've given us. Thank everyone in Brunswick that marched, that stood out in front of this courthouse, that was called a lynch mob, but they kept on marching. And let us know that all whites are not racist, and all blacks are not worthless, that we're all your children, and we will give you the grace and give you the glory. The glory be yours, not ours. Let us not be proud, and let us not be vengeful, but let us be thankful that you brought us closer together today. These blessings we ask in your name and your sake. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. We never had a Thanksgiving day like today.
And they cheered. Now, I just think for his cadence, I like Sharpton. I once met him in a men's bathroom, totally by accident, just coincidence. Hey, you're Reverend Al. Hey, look, Reverend Al, I'm washing my hands now. No, he was a good guy, but years ago I met him, and I just thought that Reverend Al was right. This brought us closer together, no matter where you are, right? Not all whites are racist. Not all blacks are worthless. It was a good summation that we needed to hear. It wasn't a binary black-white thing. It was, hey, this is the people, this is justice, isn't this great? And then Ben Crump, he got up and talked. And he also said something that got to me.
Did this. We all together, black, white, activists, faith members, lawyers, prosecutors. We did this together. We said, America, we will make us better than what we saw in that video. And I would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge, even though we are clapping and we're cheering and we applaud, Wanda and Marcus still are devastated because they're missing a mod.
Yes, that's right.
Devastated.
That's right.
And so even though this is not a celebration, it is a reflection to acknowledge that the spirit of a mod defeated the lynch mob. The spirit of a mob defeated the lynch mob. The spirit of a mob defeated the lynch mob.
See, now that really was. I know other commentators were saying this was a lynch mob going after Ahmaud Arbery, but I was gonna be a little. I wasn't sure. I wasn't gonna say. I was just taking what the jury would. I taking what the evidence was there. I call them vigilantes. I guess it's sort of the same. But the spirit of Ahmaud defeated a lynch mob. Okay. So let's go to Professor Daniel Phil Gonzalez. Professor Daniel Phil, I'm coming to you right now. You are on camera. Hi, Professor Daniel Phil.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Thank you. Professor Daniel Phil, College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. Also a JD, so he knows the law. So what did you think? Your reaction, sir, to what we've been talking about, the Arbery verdicts?
Uh, as you earlier, despite the fact that the prosecution did an excellent job
Yeah.
in tearing apart the defense case, it still was, for me, 50-50.
Yeah, it was close.
It could have gone against them. It
Yeah.
would be interesting to hear some reporting on any of the statements made by jurors afterwards. But I heard one comment, and I can't remember which news source it was, but I heard one comment that said there were at least two jurors who had to be convinced that there was no self-defense argument, that there was no valid self-defense argument,
Well,
and
yeah.
that the video, repeated analysis of the video, helped to get that done. That coupled with, of course, the prosecution's
Well,
arguments.
if there was no self-defense, or if there was no citizen's arrest, that was the key thing.
Right.
There's the citizen's arrest law has already been thrown out, but they were claiming the citizen's arrest. If there was no citizen's arrest, then you couldn't even claim self-defense, right?
Right. Well, they can
I,
claim self-defense in any instance,
yeah,
whether or not there's a valid claim of citizen's arrest. She did an excellent job. I mean, if you compare the Rittenhouse case to the case, right? I even feel badly about calling it the Rittenhouse case because he was the in the Arbery case, we're calling it properly the death of a murdered person, right? And it made a difference right away, the kind of perspective you had on this case. But the prosecution got bad facts, and bad facts meaning very difficult to prove the level of necessary to cover their charges. Um, and I thought they made some errors right up front. And then they didn't raise the issue of a lack of self-defense, right? That the nation argument, right? That it was Rittenhouse who was the provocateur, and that
right.
people were acting to him having pointed the gun at people, and including one of the dead victims.
All right. So you're
So
talking about the Rittenhouse case now.
yes, they had bad facts, but they
Yeah.
also had a bad judge, as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
And when
Okay.
you
But let's
compare that
yeah.
Arbery case, they had excellent facts. Okay, so the only arguments that needed to be made, and the somewhat technical arguments that needed to be made, were about the act of the law, and she was just outstanding. Again, comparing her behavior to the prosecution in the Rittenhouse case, they did very little to in their opening statements. They did very
Right.
little to pre-educate the jury, and they didn't raise the provocation issue until through the trial. They didn't even
Yeah.
set that up, you know.
See, this
So
is
the,
the
the
thing about,
prosecution in this instance was great. I mean, the, people should be looking at the way she did this in law school. That it was
yeah,
that good.
she really educated the jury at the end in terms of what got me when she said, "Look, we're not talking about whether or not these men are good men or bad men. We're just looking at what they did, looking at their actions." And she said, and by using the facts, we can say, you know what you did, and now we know what you did. And
Yeah,
it's
she did
just
a good
these
job.
actions, yeah, that ended in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And it's not I think this is significant. What struck me is that, you got this basically, 11 white person jury, essentially an all white jury. And you had to appeal to this idea that these people can still be good people and murderers. That was a strange,
Yeah,
uh, logic, because otherwise you would have people being sympathetic toward these people, saying, "Oh, but they were just trying to protect their property. They were just trying to protect their home, just like me, and I will do the same thing." Right? You said, "Well, yeah, okay, they could be good people, but did they kill him? Did they murder him? And did they break the law? No one gets a free pass," she said. Donikoski, the prosecutor. No one gets a free pass. We just need to hold people accountable. And they did. And I think that's how you appeal in a non-racist way to potential racists who want to side with the white defendant.
she
And
was
I
very
think,
careful to avoid the reference to racism as an institutional factor in American society. She didn't bring that up at all. The
well, she
closest she
she
ever got
hinted close. She hinted at
close.
it closely, but she did avoid, because I think, like I said, if you're going up against that kind of jury, an
Yeah,
11 white person jury, you don't want to
in
offend
that in
them.
that county,
Well,
in that kind of
yeah,
county, in that kind of neighborhood. You know,
yeah. I think also, don't you think that the there was a lot of talk amongst people, analysts, people outside, about the long toenail argument.
oh God,
When the defense, Laura Hogue of the defense, she was Brian's attorney. She said, "Oh well, Ahmaud Arbery was showing up in shorts. He was wearing no socks to cover those dirty long toenails," which, it's the coded word for, the less than human, the dirty, the unhygienic,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it was offensive. Um,
extremely. I think it backfired.
yeah,
I think
well,
even with the kind of jury that we're talking about,
yeah,
that was so gross that
yeah,
they
but
probably reacted adversely to it.
don't you think that what she was going for was the hope of maybe getting one
Yeah,
person to hang, right?
that's all you need. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's all you need.
yeah, and it really speaks to a part of the legal system that people have been manipulating juries for a long time in that
Yes,
way, appealing to
yes.
race, appealing or not to race, appealing to racism, appealing to the racism in jurors. But this is why you have peremptory challenges and why you get people off the jury. But unfortunately, I think they got people who would be sympathetic toward blacks off the jury. They kicked off
Right.
people who might be, right. Otherwise, you wouldn't have an 11, white person jury. So there were a lot of things that looked like it would be much, much tougher to get the verdicts that they came out with. But fortunately, the judge was solid, the prosecutor was very solid, and she really educated uh, the jury how to look at this so they could live with themselves, so they can live with their verdict. So
Yeah.
What do
I,
you think about
I,
Asian Americans,
yeah.
Dan?
I don't know if they're paying attention. I really
No.
don't. No. I think they may be looking at it because the whole country is looking at it, and it's a
Yeah.
major element in the media. But if what I'm looking at or looking is whether or not people identify with the circumstances, and I don't think most Asian Americans identify with the circumstances.
You don't. You
Um,
don't.
no, I have very little confidence in that. I think
Why? Why do you? Why do you say?
there's a substantial percentage that fairly well educated and that um, may identify with the circumstances, but they can't put themselves, in his shoes, or as it were, or shoes, whatever you want to say. I don't think they can identify with that. Uh,
Yeah.
I've been teaching for over 50 years. I can tell you that for the 50 years, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, in after the period of consciousness raising that occurred in the 60s and early 70s, uh, by the mid 70s, people were starting to say, politics doesn't matter. People, I really hate politics. They walk away from it. Okay, they took for granted a lot of the things that we put into legal and political and social reality. Took them for granted. I think the last major case that signaled uh, a leftward a leftward swing of socio-political in the United States was Roe. Was Roe versus Wade, which is under immediate attack and for several years now. So I don't think Asian Americans that they never see themselves as being in the position African Americans or Native Americans for that matter. They don't identify with that. Even in their poverty, they don't identify with it. And some of that is because of our own. You got to remember, over 50% of most Asian populations, right? In some instances, over 60% of Asian populations are immigrants, first
Yeah.
generation immigrants. Okay, you have to take all of those kind of things into consideration. And I don't think those first generation immigrants, unless they're quite young when they arrive here, right? They don't identify. They don't even identify with the civil rights period, and they don't see themselves as beneficiaries of the civil rights movement.
So
And
Dan,
it's very
Dan, how do we Dan, how do we turn this around? Because look, you and I are born here, and I can identify with this situation. I have been on
because
the
of
other
our
side.
experiences.
Yeah, and I've been on the other side of this situation where people have come after me thinking that, oh, well, what is this Filipino guy doing? He must be up to no good. I understand that.
Sure,
But you don't think that some of the other Asian Americans, you don't think they're
relatively few do, and when they are confronted with direct and sometimes even violent racism, racially motivated, even in those instances, they don't see their situation being similar to that of African Americans or Latin nations, right? That also suffer those kinds of confrontations, those crimes. They just see them it to themselves and their own experience. So there's one of the things that we've talked about before, program and elsewhere, is that to address these issues, we can't do it as individual populations, as individual ethnic groups. We have to have alliance the board. We are still a
right.
relatively small population. If even if you gather everybody together under the aggregate API, right?
Yeah.
We are a relatively small population, and so there has to be a high level. I'm not talking about moderate level, a high of cooperation with other groups that have similar experiences and perspectives on the most important issues, national and internet global issues that also affect us. And unfortunately, the educational system hasn't been doing that. It's really very obvious to me. I mean, when I have students that answer questions that I put to the class as a whole, answer them very crisply, confidently, and accurately, most importantly, right? Ask them, especially early in the semester, you know, what kind of environment, were you exposed to that gave you that? Most of them say one of two things, sometimes both. One is I had a high school teacher that was really good, and this is an isolated situation. I mean, we're talking about one teacher, right, that made it possible for this one student, and they're usually white students, by the way, and they're coming to Asian American Studies class, they're coming to an ethnic studies class, so they they already have an open mindset, and they have a curiosity about how a professor who's teaching the same material in law, right, will what's different about his approach as an Asian American, you know, and my the best compliments that I ever get are from white students and black students. Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
they're non-Asians, right?
what do the Asians
And the
say?
greatest critic I get are from Asian students. The greatest
The
resistance
Asians.
that I get.
All right, Dan. Now, all right. So, where would you put the Asian Americans in terms of the way Asian America is sort of blocked out politically, just based on recent elections? It's usually 60% Democrat, 40% Republican.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's 60-40. So would you say that that's the way you can superimpose that on people and how they view the Arbery verdicts, 60-40,
Hmm.
or do you think you're
No, the
saying they don't
Arbery
care?
case. No, well, they don't care enough. I think they would feel that justice was served, and I'm saying maybe 90, of the Asians will feel that justice was served, but but it was justice being served in an expected manner rather than we were in doubt,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I was earlier and you said, hey,
Yeah.
it was maybe 60-40. Yeah, and we were in doubt. I was in doubt as well. Why? When the facts are so strong, when the law was so well applied, Wedge was fair minded and candid, right? And quiet. He was really
Yeah.
good. Okay, that's the way that a case should be managed, right? Again, to the Wisconsin
Rittenhouse. Yeah.
case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it
So
starts with education, and our students have not been educated. What we used to call civics and all that. I reflect on civics. I hate civics teacher in high school, but I went to you know a local Jesuit high school, and they put a lot of emphasis, depth of understanding, and we had an exercise in that class. We had several exercises where we had to pick an issue that we thought was important, and we had to we had to develop a team of at least two people, sometimes three, do that in front of the rest of the class and face them as essentially, judges and jurors of our political positions on the issues. And with my luck, in that class, I was called with my partner as the first people to make a report. So I thought, oh man, this is terrible. So we did the report. It happened to be about whether or not the Teamsters and the AFL-CIO and the ILWU were taking the appropriate positions on the issue of containerization, right? Modernizing the ports. Way before most people who are
yeah.
listening or watching now were even born. But it key position taken by all those unions, containerization, that led to the movement of all you got to do is take a look at the ports. Where are cranes that unload the huge freighters. They're all in Oakland. And the reason they're in Oakland rather than Cisco is because of the stance that those unions took way back in the mid 1960s. I mean, it wasn't even the mid 1960s. What was it?
All right. So Dan, let's
64.
not talk about the history of ports in San Francisco Bay Area, but
Yeah, well, but see,
what the point is that you were able to get critical thinking going and able to gain an education.
we don't do that. Civics doesn't do that. What they do is, civics classes, they're taught out of books that present the Americans in its most ideal terms.
Yeah,
So
look,
they
I agree with you.
read the Constitution. Yeah,
I agree with you, but here's the thing. As I point out, Robert Aaron Long, the guy who's accused in the spa killings in Atlanta, he happened to be in court this week because he's got uh, five other murders to consider. He's already been accused and
and
convicted
convicted.
up in
Yeah,
Cherokee County. So now
right.
he's got his trial coming up, and they are going to press for hate crimes. And now and the same thing's going to happen with the Arbery trial, folks. The McMichaels and Brian are going to go before on federal hate crime charges in February. So I I mean I think if you're Asian American and you are taken by Stop API Hate and all the animus against Asian Americans over the last 18 months, I think you're going to pay attention to this a little bit. No?
Uh, they may pay attention, but are they are they identifying possibility that those facts and these legal circumstances could be something that affects them?
All right.
That's where
So what you're
people
saying is that,
only learn when they think they're going to be personally affected. I'll be
so
just straight up with you.
all right. So you're saying that Asian Americans don't identify with the African American condition.
They do not, and many Asian Americans are outright racist in their own regard, and they don't want to identify with it. Exempt themselves from the possibility of those things happening to them because they ain't black. It's as simple as that. You know?
Yeah, and it's
I mean,
a combination of race and it's class and
yes, yes,
what's going to be the thing that bridges us. That I mean, because I would think that if people are paying attention to this, I know that myself as an Asian American, I look at the Arbery case and I say there, but for fortune, right?
go I, yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
we can identify with that because we've lived under circumstances where we have either been confronted by similar circumstances or we've been in it, literally,
yeah,
of circumstances. Near enough other people, we know what happens. Us we saw it at work, when we were starting out in the workforce, and you could see the difference in treatment of people according to race. And there were very few places where you could expect a milder form of racism. Uh, people generalize back and forth about each other's cultures, and those kinds of things still in our communities. You know,
yeah,
and once again, we have the highest immigration rates, right? Two ethnic groups in particular, and that's it, Chinese and Filipinos, right, have the highest immigration rates. But we're being challenged, if you want to look at it as some kind of competition, right, by Asian Indians, South Asians, right? And we've got more former refugee populations coming in as well, and new refugee populations coming in as well. These are first generation people who may or may not be that informed about the race and racism in American society.
all
You
right.
know,
So Dan, you really don't think the Arbery trial is going to have much of an impact on Asian Americans, then, right? In terms of
I think they will notice it as an issue for African Americans and people of perhaps lower class. You raised the class issue, right? Uh, but I really don't think they identify with them. Now, there are going to be people who urban circumstances, right, where quote the word diversity is a reality, right? And there's a lot of interaction with them. San Francisco, I see African Americans and Latinos going to any restaurant, and I see African Americans hitting red ribbon. I mean, I was just in there buying some. Of course, these products have to be a little bit right, but
Filipino.
and after going in there and picking up their favorite pastries, and they look like they did it on a regular basis. They would come in and do a specific item, and then take just that little bag, and go in and out and say hi and very cordial with salespeople. And well, there's a lot of that was in Daly City. There's a red ribbon in Daly City, right? And so I saw this really positive interaction. I see restaurants and everything. But this is a different place. You got to realize the Bay Area and specifically San Francisco, right? Very different place, right? Uh, Look at all of the
But there's
racial
still a lot
pressures.
of
Go ahead.
still a lot of racism exists though.
Oh, absolutely. In San
Yeah.
Francisco, I had a African American student came from Ohio, moved out here from Ohio, and we would talk a lot, sometimes in classes, because I had work as a TA for me, as an undergraduate TA, and he was that good, he was that smart, and I really valued his perspective. He could compare what he found here in San Francisco with what he left behind in Ohio. But in a conversation with a well-known judge from the Filipino American community here in San Francisco, in preparation for an interview that I was to record that day, um, this gentleman, the African American teaching assistant, said, "Well, San Francisco ain't as liberal as people make it out to be," and
Yeah.
the judge was kind of sad,
Hey, I
but
believe
he's
that.
right.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
believe
me
that.
too.
Hey, Dan, get back to the Arbery case in terms of the justice system. If an Asian American was killed, and we're going to have a situation in Georgia where an Asian American was killed, do we get justice?
Well, the likelihood that a person American would get killed in Georgia, it would not be a rural area, right? That had only that had even as much as 25% of Asians. We caught in the urban and suburban areas. Okay, so
Right.
the likelihood that a person fair trial, right, or that a person who's convicted of serious harm or even the murder of the killing of American would probably be convicted. Depends on the facts once again, right? On how strong the facts are. But race prejudice, right, and racism might not be as much of a factor in a case where there's an Asian American victim in urban or suburban area, even if they're in Georgia.
I
And that's
mention it
true
because
across the board.
we got three Korean American women who were killed in that spot killing,
Yes.
and that's coming up. So, well, I mean, from that perspective, I think some people who pay attention to the news might look at this Arbery situation and see it for that, for those purposes, the upcoming news, and also for the broader purpose of whether or not the justice system works in America, because that's kind of the
Right.
takeaway. And I want to play a clip. This is Jason Sheffield. He was the uh, the attorney for Greg McMichael and Travis McMichael's. All the McMichael's attorneys are on this clip. So this is Jason Sheffield, and here's what he had to say. He says,
"First of all, we want to thank everyone who gathered here in front of the Glenn County Courthouse to show their support either for the Arbery family or for the McMichaels."
So there you. They're very kind of even there. Hey, whatever side you're on, I guess that kind of surprised me because they weren't embattled. They weren't uh, trying to say, oh, we were somehow cheated out of our victory. So here's more.
We understand more than you know,
So
Michaels.
so he says
We understand more than you know how valuable it is to have people come together, peacefully assemble, share their voices, share what's in their hearts, share what's in their minds. This is a very difficult day for Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael. These are two men who honestly believed that what they were doing was the right thing to do. However, the Glenn County jury has spoken. They have found them guilty, and they will be sentenced. And that is a very disappointing and sad verdict for myself and for Bob and for our team. But we also recognize that this is a day of celebration for the Arbery family. We cannot tear our eyes away from the way that they feel about this. And we understand that they feel they have gotten justice today. We respect that. We honor that because we honor this jury trial system.
And that's sort of the victory speech, right? For the jury system. I thought when I heard that, I said, well, thank goodness. I mean, these are people who defended essentially racists, right? And they lost.
Mm-hmm.
And they
Mm-hmm.
came clean. They said, look, they were found guilty, but they actually thought they were doing the right thing. They honestly believe that what they were doing was the right thing to do, is the quote. But
I thought it was
wrong.
a really even-handed approach. An indication that they knew during the process of the trial that they were losing, or that was a very strong possibility. And so once they accepted that probability, but at least possibility, they had to start considering how they would act. Okay, given convictions, and I thought they did a good job. I thought they had much better situation to be able to make that kind of a statement. I think they were honestly trying to avoid doing anything that would cause one side or the other matter to act out and
Oh yeah,
prevent violence.
yeah. I mean,
So
because
that was good. That was good.
I mean, you could have expected. Well, the people who lost, where were the Proud Boys? Thank goodness, they weren't out there.
Yeah,
Thank
sure.
goodness. Thank goodness the far right didn't embrace the McMichaels.
They could have, yeah.
And they could have. Thank goodness it was civil.
Mm-hmm.
Thank goodness the people in charge, except for the toenail lady, who I understand put out some statement that she was floored and she was tearing up and crying when she heard the verdicts. But I'm just glad that this is the way it's supposed to work, right? This is like when the South lost the Civil War, they went back under the rock and everyone,
that didn't happen.
we
That
but no, I mean,
happen.
but I mean, it just
We
struck
got
me
the
that
Ku Klux Klan is what we got.
yeah. Well, I just don't think this is the last.
Ku Klux Klan.
I just don't think this is the last.
Absolutely.
Well, we're gonna have the hate crime trial in February,
Sure.
and so
Sure.
probably there will be the conspiracy theorists and the January 6th folks who haven't been put in the jail. There will be the right wing folks who will, just as they embraced Rittenhouse, they will embrace the McMichaels and try to, I don't know, start a defense. Well, I don't know. They're already convicted here, but they will appeal. They will appeal. Is there any chance that anything will be overturned on appeal?
Not for, and I watched about 70% of the process. I didn't watch every, but I watched about 70%, and I didn't see anything.
I mean,
they
they've tried
to get
this
He
trial.
did. The defense tried. Yeah.
Well,
and,
I don't. Well, let's see. They're going to appeal, and then there's going to be the federal hate crime or the civil rights trial coming up in February. It's not over, but the McMichaels will and Brian will be in prison, and and we'll just have to see how the public reacts, because now it's up to the public how the public deals with this. I think certainly if you were, sympathetic with the Arbery and Arbery family, uh, you'll have a happy Thanksgiving. And if you were sympathetic toward the McMichaels, let's hope that you are as civil and as mature as their defense attorneys,
Right.
because
See,
it sounds like
your overall question about whether or not Asian Americans, are affected by this, and I said they're not going to be paying attention to it that much. Uh, they are kind of isolate themselves. Speaking, we isolate ourselves from, and and so I would answer you this way, right? At at Thanksgiving process, whether or not it's the Thanksgiving dinner or sometime during the weekend, do you think most Asian American families are going to make reference to this trial? They're going to make reference to the outcome and say, we ought to be interested in these things happening. It's all indication that there may be movement in American society, towards a more just society. And you think that any of them are going to do that, or what?
I
Or that?
I will I will take a poll at my dinner. Look, I think, look, you're right. I can't think of anyone, unless you were in a family of news, news followers,
Yeah,
lawyers,
yeah.
academics,
Maybe
that
maybe teachers. Yeah,
teachers,
maybe teachers. Yeah.
but regular folks, auntie and uncle are coming over. Oh, okay, great. What's on the is are the Warriors playing on TV?
Yeah, and how's it been? And how's you doing? And of course,
Yeah.
it's all the family catch up stuff.
Right.
And is my cousin stupid? That
Yeah.
kind of thing. And
Right.
and
Yeah,
you
you're right.
are they still married? All that kind of stuff.
All right. I
And
will not. I will not try to impose this idea that anyone should be talking or debating about the McMichaels or Ahmaud Arbery or Rittenhouse or Kenosha or
yeah, yeah.
Waukesha or anything, or
Well, the big rule.
weaponizing
Big rule is
cars.
don't talk politics. When you That's the big rule. Number one rule. Don't talk politics.
Right. Don't.
And I observed that rule. I observed that rule with our in-laws. With
Yeah.
my son's wife's family, and
Yeah.
uh, you know, uh, I some conversation on a couple of occasions, and in one instance, they're Asian American, right?
Right.
They're not Filipino, but they're extremely well educated, and quite well to do,
And they don't talk
and
politics.
so uh, only historical politics.
See, yeah.
For
I mean, look,
example,
yeah.
concentration camps, right?
Right. Internment camp. Right. Yeah.
Internment, yeah,
Yeah, I could see that.
and
Or yeah, or like Chinese riots, or something like historical
yeah,
things.
yeah,
Look, I see this. Most people, unless they are, I don't know, they could be attorneys, they could be civil rights activists, maybe,
right. Community
maybe.
service workers, even
Yeah,
people in related community fields like medicine or
yeah.
but a bunch of very conservative doctors,
Oh yeah, yeah.
even today, right? And
Yeah, just yeah. Look, Dan,
socially conservative.
I appreciate your perspective on this. And I always, it just seems like there's a never ending stream of trials. I mean, as we were waiting for this trial,
Yeah,
the Charlottesville thing came down. Trials always make news, because that's usually someone has decided, a judge, a jury has decided, and now we have an answer, right? And if it
right.
doesn't agree with people, then they argue, and then there's more talk. Except if you're Asian American, and then no. Although, look,
The
Asian
it's
Americans are
it's
speaking out.
yeah, but they may bring this thing up, but as I said, they'll be satisfied was done for black people. Justice
Yeah.
was done for African Americans. But I don't think they will identify uh,
Yeah.
either with the circumstance or with the situation that
Yeah.
confronts African Americans. Right? It's like arguing with white people when you somebody brings up the issue. Yeah, this stupid concept of white privilege. Right? I mean, people were denying white privilege 5 years ago, and now people are asking the discussion of white supremacy. Right? So a lot
Yeah.
happened within 5 years. A
Yeah.
lot happened within 5 years.
And remember when we were younger, how often did white supremacy even come up? Like zero.
Even white privilege.
Yeah.
It never came. It
Never
never
came.
came up.
No, no one talked about it. I mean,
No.
we knew about the
Well,
KKK.
we did
We
in
knew
ethnic
about,
studies.
yeah, but in general conversation, no one talked about white privilege or white
Yeah, yeah,
supremacy, and it just,
yeah.
and now suddenly, boom, and
They would
I
see
think
you
that's
as a
positive,
radical. They would see you outright radical. And I
right?
warned my students. I said, look, when we deal with these concepts, you got to understand we're dealing with these concepts in a relatively safe space, right? We're in a classroom, that's operates under the rubric of the College of Ethnic Studies, right? And
Right,
we're at SF State, we're in
right.
San Francisco, so all of this stuff here. But if you take this home and you raise these issues in a family environment, you
Yeah,
might really jeopardize, your relationship. You might
yeah.
get a will, or
Well,
something like that. You got to be
well,
careful.
come on, Dan. This is really. I mean, the Ahmaud Arbery trial was another example of white supremacy on trial, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
It was
But see,
white supremacy, white privilege.
okay, sure, sure. I don't think that means that the white jurors who came up with these convictions, who decided on these, think that means that they recognize their. And I certainly
No,
don't think that they may recognize that people may associate them with supremacy, okay, if they don't clearly understand that the law applied to the facts in this case, right, mean these guys are guilty. Okay,
yeah,
so they might be white supremacy, but I don't think that means that they recognize their own privilege.
no.
Okay,
I
I
mean,
don't
you're
think.
right.
Is there such
I,
an Asian privilege? Is there such a thing as Asian American privilege? And my argument is there is.
I
There
think
is a
it is, but
hierarchy of race in American
right.
society. There's a hierarchy of race in American society, and we are above several other racial groups.
You believe that,
Okay. Oh yeah, and it's gendered. Okay, I
right?
know we've never gone this
Well, I mean,
far before on your on your
right.
on
But
your, on your program. So just
you
tell me
believe.
if you think I'm going too deep here.
No, no, no. It's just that that we got to come to an end on this topic. But you don't believe that Asians are superior, but you're saying that there is a kind of a racial pecking order.
There is a racial pecking order in American society. Okay, and it is influenced by the majority white society, right? Where you are. It is also influenced by all of the institutions that have been created by historically majority white society, okay? Including the educational system,
Right.
okay? So so what group that even white people within their education environment?
Right. Asians have.
That's right. And
Yeah.
and it's not even just East anymore. It's not North Asians anymore. It's obviously South Asians and
Yeah.
and former refugee populations from Southeast Asia, right? And and so we are now caught more clearly in an odd situation when if you go back 100 years, 80 years, 50 years, we were loathed because we were so different. We were seen anti-Occidental, right? We're Orientals. We're anti-Occidental, right? We are so different. We can't be welcomed or even tolerated equals in American society, and that was the
Yeah.
law. That was the law. The Exclusion Act of yes, of course, aimed at Chinese, but it was enlarged to encompass all Asians. Okay,
Right.
the only exception, of course, was Filipino because the American flag flew over the Philippines. But when they signed off on eventual independence for the Philippines, so we became excludable. We became alienable, right?
Yeah.
And even deportable,
Right. So,
voluntarily.
Dan,
Right?
what brings us together then? What is the thing that'll bring us together? Clearly, you know, we were talking about the jury, and they don't see their white privilege, and we got into this discussion about Asian
About Asian
American
privilege.
privilege.
Yeah,
What brings us
yeah.
together then? What is the thing that will bring us all, make us all one?
Well, a commitment, a real commitment, an honest commitment to justice. That's you got to have people understand that there are inequalities. First of all, they have to accept that there's inequalities that exist in American society. They have to also understand that while they may not be directly affected by those inequalities, okay, or they might not see that they're affected by those inequalities. That's more often the case, right? But there are people within their own communities that are affected by those
Yeah.
inequalities, okay? And class
Right.
is a major, and gender is a major factor.
Right.
Okay, I think
And
I
when,
think Asian women have greater privilege than Asian men in American society.
that
Right?
that white
So
women.
the question is,
Wait, did you
are
say white women or Asian women?
Asian women? Asian women
Eh,
have a greater degree of privilege, frequently for all the wrong reasons, right? Because
Yeah.
they're objectified and all that. But I tell people in my class, this class gets kind of steep because we have to look at the political reality of our circumstance in American society. Okay, but I've heard from a lot of people of their professions, right, that when they were remember in the just in high school still at the time,
Mm.
but this is before IBM came out with its own computer, and Apple had they were still out somewhere, but once these small companies came out with PCs, remember, and you were big old suckers, right?
Right. Right.
Remember
Right.
K Pro said,
Yes. Yes.
"Yeah, we got a portable PC," and the thing about a medium sized luggage case, and
It's
heavy
like
as hell. Anyway, my
like a
point
sewing
my
machine.
point is my point is how those companies get started, and one of the biggest competitors against what would become IBM's Big Blue, their PC, was Wang Industries. And how did Wang Industries get started? Well, he was a VP in IBM, and he felt, I'm not wearing this. This is as high as it's going to go. They're not really listening to me. To start my own damn company, and it was quite successful.
Yeah.
Until
Wang. Yeah.
we, yeah, they started to they meaning all of the companies started looking for a common language. We would eventually move towards MS DOS, morphed into Windows, right? But
Right.
that's where we're at, right? So a lot of companies got started because people, and this includes Asian CEOs, right? Because they felt that they weren't getting treated fairly
They got dissed.
within an existing corporation. They got disc. They
And
got put down.
meanwhile,
I heard
Asian
that
women rose.
the
Asian women
women
rose.
rose as far as women could rise, right? But
Hey Dan,
they need to.
we're getting into a really big subject that will require
Yes, but
much more.
It affects Asian Americans in particular. Particularly, it affects us on a gender basis. It's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. But look, I always appreciate your insights, especially, especially since you have a JD, we can talk about these murder trials and what they mean in terms of race and society. And one last question. Will we be
Sure,
talking about the Arbery trial for in for years to come? Will this be a milestone of sorts?
it'll be a milestone. It'll be something that we can point to as a turning point for the better. Okay, but
Yeah.
I don't think people will into that deeply. Not the way that we've gotten into it, where we talk about the comparative
Yeah.
circumstances between Georgia.
Well, let's see what happens. You go to your dinner or wherever you meet your relatives. I'm just
Oh
going to
yeah,
be a small family gathering
yeah,
where
us
I
too.
am,
Very
and
small.
we'll see if anyone mentions who mentions Arbery or Rittenhouse first, and then we'll
Okay,
come
you
back
got to remember
and we'll.
if you have me on next week, make sure that you remind me that we're going to bring that topic up. But
All
yeah,
right, I'm
uh,
curious.
I,
I'm curious.
in our small gathering, it will be likely to come up because
Okay,
the
all right,
people that are going to be here are rather socially conscious, right?
okay.
And
So
they and so it's really not a fair comparison, right?
well, let's just see.
Uh,
Let's just see if it comes up, and
yeah.
maybe we should have more conservatives on the invite list, or more liberal,
If
right?
we had a
Well,
oh yeah, if we had a larger gathering, there would be uh, a possibility. I would hold myself. I've done that several times over several holidays,
okay,
and avoided it. But there were
yeah,
instances where even when Trump was, when it was
yeah,
only like his first year or second year,
uh,
and he was already screwing up, right? He was already screwing up really badly. He said some stuff making an offhanded reference to Trump when the conversation was about somebody committed
uh,
an issue, a problem, an action that was both
uh,
moral, ethical, and I said illegal. And then they said, "Oh, how what make this comparison moral, ethical, illegal?" And I said, "Well, something could be very nasty and be all agree is bad behavior, but it might not be illegal. There might not be
yeah,
a law that covers that particular behavior." And so when you say three, right? When people say, "Well, is it a legal matter?" Because they know I got it, the JD two, and I say, "Well, oh," and I so offhand they'll say, "Oh, like Trump." Somebody really got offended. I mean, they snapped their neck, snapped around and looked at me like, and and I said, "Yeah, that's going to be." And they had a son, not their son, but their daughter's
uh,
husband, who's a Qer. He's and and he's
QAnon,
going
huh?
off. Right? Oh yeah,
Oh, look, look,
yeah,
we got to
well
stop it
he's
there.
white. The
We got
guy's
to
white, so
we got to end
he's
it there.
pure.
Otherwise, we'll be talking for another 2 hours. Hey, Dan, thank you very much. You have a great Thanksgiving. Try the
Thank you
vegans.
very much, and
Try the vegan
I
stuff.
am thankful for your having me on every once in a while so we can have these
Oh
wonderful
well,
discussions. I hope that
I
other
am
people are appreciative of it as
I
well, and I
appreciate
will
you.
be telling my stories. I got to put
I
do you have a list of the topics that you cover, so that I can tell
Oh
them
yeah,
which
yeah,
ones
yeah.
to look at?
Sure, sure.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
I got
this is
a
show.
list in it because I'm not only gonna refer them to the ones that I'm in. I'm gonna refer them to ones that are to your because I refer to Aldef,
Oh, great. Yeah, the
because
Aldef
yeah,
side
because it's in print. It's in
Yeah,
print and
or the
there
web.
are connections to other factual statements about judicial circumstances and political circumstances that you are not necessarily commenting on. So you have your commentary, right, and
Yeah,
your editorial kind of
yeah,
situation, and then you also have just the straight facts, without
yeah.
line. So
Well,
Aldef is a great resource.
great. Hey, Dan, thank you very much. Have a great Thanksgiving. And
Hey, say hi to everybody,
yeah, yeah. Same
and
here.
you know,
We'll see you
yeah,
next week. I'll be in touch.
vegans can still overeat, so take it easy, dude.
Yeah. Oh,
Take
I
it easy.
that is true. Okay. All right, Dan. Take care. There's Dan Gonzalez, professor, College of Ethnic Studies, Asian American Studies, Law and Politics, JD. Bring him on to talk about the Arbery case. Interesting, his perspective on Asian Americans, and if any of us will be talking about the Arbery. We should. I know some people will. I mean, if you're an activist, you will. If you're, you know, into BTS, maybe not. If you want to play Squid Game or watch Squid Game, maybe not. But I think it is a milestone. It is going to be a marker that lets us know where we are. Maybe we're further along than we think. Maybe we're not. But congratulations to the Arbery family, to Wanda Cooper, the mother, and Ahmad's father. They're all there. Yeah, I really didn't know what was going to happen. I'm glad that the verdict came down the way it did. And I think Dan is right. We're probably going to be studying how the prosecution, how the case was tried as an example of do's and don'ts, especially in a kind of a hot button area, all white, mostly white jury, mostly white area. How do you get guilty verdicts against 3 white defendants? I'm telling you, that closing, she said, we're not, and this struck me when she said this, when the prosecutor, Donakowski, said it. She said, we're not judging whether these men are good or bad. We're just holding them accountable. That hit me. It's wow. If I'm a white racist, I'll just say, hey, did he play fair? I can ding him on that. And they did. Unanimous. Although Dan said that he heard that maybe 2 we'll see what the jury said. If the jury held out and said, not quite ready to be unanimous, not quite, but they all came around. That's the important thing. That's progress. That's modern America. And we learned the lesson from the Deep South. All right. Hey, I'm Emil Guillermo. This is the Micro Talk Show of the AAPI, the AAXs, and the ALLs. We are all inclusive. Emil Amok, if you want to email me, you can read me on the ALDEF blog, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund blog, aaldef.org/blog. This is show number 187. My goodness, show 1. Amok, or WDAAAT 187, or Amok 187. Like I said, you can catch it on the YouTube channel, Emil Guillermo YouTube, or emilguillermo.media on Facebook. You can find it on Twitter at Emil Amok, and I'll have the replay up on amok.com. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving, and I will have a special story time show. Like Dan was saying, you're not supposed to talk politics, but you can tell stories. And so I tell a story about my grandmother. I've invited 2 other storytellers to talk about their families. Julian Simeon, Eleanor Clement Glass. They're joining me. We'll be recording it and then putting it on live tomorrow. So catch it. And I'll be playing it throughout the weekend. I'll be back on Friday, 2:00 Pacific, to talk more about everything else worth talking about. If you're a regular listener to the show, you know this is the time. This is the time where I tell us to hug our elbows. If you have doubt, don't have doubt. If you don't feel scared, feel secure. Pat yourself on the back if you can. You belong. You're worth it. This is where I tell you that as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Have a great Thanksgiving. Story time tomorrow. Right here. Till then, Emil Guillermo. Mahal Gita.